Our coverage from Davos at the World Economic Forum continues. I'm joined by Harvard economist Ken Rogoff. Professor Rogoff, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Donald Trump has just taken office for the second time. Given the policies that he has laid out, from tariffs to tax cuts, mass deportations to regulation, what do you think the economy will look like under his leadership?
I don't think we're going to see the boom that we saw in the first time, partly because back then, zero interest rates, there was a lot of room to borrow money. The economy was still recovering from COVID. This time, we've had a boom, a debt-fueled, migration-fueled boom going on for quite a while. And even if he didn't do anything, eventually we would run into some slowdown, not necessarily around the corner. And a lot of his policies are sort of geared towards extending that, putting more fuel on the fire, so to speak, in an already very strong economy that, if anything's overheated. The deportation, let's just set that aside. I don't believe that's going to happen. There'll be symbolic deportation. I don't think that's going to have a big effect, but what will have a big effect is not having the mass immigration. I think the open border policies was nuts. It was immigration, legal immigration, good, illegal immigration, bad. But near term, it was one of the factors, as Powell said and others, pushing up the economy, along with this massive string of deficits that he ran. So Trump, if he just keeps doing that, the inflation, either the inflation will come or interest rates will have to be even higher than they are now.
I want to unpack that a lot more. First, you said you don't think we're going to see the economic boom, and let's set immigration aside. Does that mean we just see tepid growth, or do you see a prospect for slow growth to perhaps recession?
So I think the most likely scenario, with what I think are the most likely policies being passed, are strong and then a slowdown in at least by the slowdown into recession, the second half of his term. It's just tough within the cycle not to do that, and also when you goose up the economy with these policies, most of which are not structural, they're really demand policies, you're going to get that effect. And by the way, I'd say the same thing with deregulation, which I applaud, but some of the deregulation, particularly in the financial sector, is probably going to lead to trouble down the road.
On the tariffs, we don't know the exact form that those are going to take, whether we're going to see more targeted versus blanketed. I wonder, some economists see them as inflationary. Others say that if we were to see blanketed tariffs, that could really cause growth to plunge and offset any inflationary impact. How do you see them?
The inflationary impact is not a big deal quantitatively, 1%, 1.5%, even with a very large across-the-board tariff that he's talking about. But it wouldn't last that long. I actually think normally the Fed would ignore that. More worrisome is that it's chaotic. It hurts these animal spirits that he's been benefiting from. It actually leads to slower growth. That happened, or was threatening to happen, when he raised tariffs in 2018. They were raising rates from zero, as you recall. And then when the tariffs hit, there was so much uncertainty, so much nervousness in the business community, they cut interest rates. So it's so hard to predict anything from Trump. Particularly, I don't think he knows what he's going to do. He's sort of winging it.
You mentioned the Fed. They penciled in 2 rate cuts for this year. Do you think they carry those out? Where do you see the path for policy?
I don't think they carry them out. I mean, I think the odds of a hike are the same as the odds of a cut. I think, with running these deficits and continuing the economy, looks strong in many ways. There's a lot of investment going on in data centers and such with AI. That whole notion that the Fed seemed to have, that the neutral interest rate was just really low, they can throw that out the window. I think that's not in our future in a recession. But even in a recession, don't expect zero interest rates again. I think even in a recession, interest rates will stay higher than we've gotten used to.
Trump has pledged, as we talked about, to scale back regulations. And on a banking panel this morning, we were hearing from bankers here in Davos that they are excited about the potential for deregulation for the banking sector and the growth that could unleash. I'm curious, though, when that happens, does that create vulnerabilities within the financial sector? What are your thoughts on that, and where do you see vulnerabilities now for perhaps future financial crises?
Well, I mean, there's good regulation and not good regulation, but what happened with some of the very small and medium-sized banks getting into trouble not so long ago, that was a result of deregulation that happened under Trump, where he put weaker restrictions on the medium-sized banks, and a lot of them are still in trouble. Interest rates have not come down. They're carrying debt on their books. The Fed is having to roll over a lot of its loans. It's not that we have this super strong banking sector. So I think if you deregulate too much in the banking sector, it's going to lead to a problem. Maybe the Fed will bail out even bigger than ever before. And then I would say that times 10 with crypto, where it has way less regulation than it needs, and we're talking about taking that away. So deregulation, in general, the general principle, the thrust of the Trump presidency, less regulation. Biden was overdoing it in many areas. I'm very sympathetic to. But I think finance is one where you have to tread a bit carefully.
15 seconds. You think Trump will get the weaker dollar that he wants?
I think Trump's going to get a weaker dollar whether he wants it or not. The dollar is very high. It's only been this high twice over the last 40 years. 1985, 2002. It's come down over the ensuing year or two. I have some conviction that that's going to happen again over the next year or two.
Professor Rogoff, thank you so much for your insight. I so appreciate it.